Hello everyone, the football season is about to start next week, so I thought that would be a great time to make a video on how to win in fantasy sports for football, the NFL on DraftKings, FanDuel, and all those daily fantasy sites. So we're going to be going over things from cash games, GPP, contest selection, to what type of research that I do, and then also how to build lineup and stacking and all of that. So starting off with the contest selection part, there are two type of contests, cash games and GPPs. So GPPs are the tournaments. We're going to start off with cash games. So these would be your head-to-heads and then also your 50-50s, double ups, triple ups. And all of these games, basically you're going to be getting paid except for the triple ups. That you're going to be paid basically double of what you are putting in. So if you're betting $1, you're going to get 2 back in double ups. For 50-50s and head-to-heads, because these sites take a percentage, you're getting back, if it's $1, you get $1.80 and so on, depending on how much you're spending. And so for cash games, it doesn't matter if you're first or you're in the last winning position because everyone's getting paid the same amount. And that just means that you can play the popular plays. You don't need to try to be sneaky, play a very low-owned player. You just play the popular plays, which are known as chalk, because they are the best plays on the slate. Now for tournaments, these would, I'm trying to go with the classic slate, not the Madden one. So there's going to be always a Millie Maker. There's 2 for the first week, and these are tournaments where if you're trying to get first, because first place is where all the money is at, and because of that, you're going to need to worry a lot more about ownership. Now, I would say you want to try to have at least 2 own plays, so 2 plays that are in the single digits, and it's not so much about the single player ownerships though. More of it nowadays is about cumulative ownership, which I'll get to later on in the video. And then just because I'm talking about loan plays, so in order to know which plays are going to be loan, it's going to be about just what type of I guess um, positive talk there is about a certain player in the industry. You can find these just by Google searching because there are a lot of articles out there, a lot of videos that you can find on YouTube that analysts, just people talk about what are the best plays for any given slate. And if they keep talking about them, then that means they're going to be high owned. So whether it's because they're a star player or someone's hurt, it's a value play, all of that, that's going to be the formula for whether a play is chalk or not. And then as far as picking which tournaments to play, so there's the Million Makers, but these ones are so top heavy that the payout usually is not going to be great. So like maybe you're looking at a tournament that generally it would be like between 23 to 27% of the field that gets paid. Now, if you play some of these though, the money is pretty much just concentrated on the top 10. So if you don't get top 10 and you're looking at these entries, there are, I mean, a million entries here. Definitely, you try to shoot for the stars here, but it's going to be hard to get into a top 10 finish. So that's why these tournaments, they're fun. If you do have the bankroll, play them because that, I mean, part of playing fantasy football is for the fun part and also being able to try to win a lot of money. That's always awesome. But if you're just starting out trying to build more of a bankroll or rather trying to see if you can play max enter your tournament, taking a look at tournaments such as the mini max, which would be 50 cents or $1 usually. So yeah, 50 cents right here, 150 entry max. These tournaments are good to just see if you're getting a max entry because you're able to play this at 150 entries at 50 cents. So you're paying $75 for the slate, and the cash or like the percentage of the field that's going to be cash, it's usually like under 23%. So it's not the best one, but again, this is just more so to see if you can be good at something like multi-entering, because in the future, if you do have a bankroll and you're able to move up, you can start playing those like $3, $5 ones that you can also enter. Maybe it's 20 max or 150 max. And then if you're not so much about multi-entering, you can play the single entries. These single entry ones, it just means that everyone can only play one lineup. So you're competing, everyone basically gets 1v1, v1, and there's 23,000 people. So there's $1 ones, there's also $2, $5, it goes up. There's a lot depending on how much you want to spend. And these usually will pay out like 27% of the field. So it's a lot better for your ROI. But the money is not going to be as great, but if you're more so about being profitable, definitely a tournament you should look at. And also, it's good for beginners as well. Now, I would say like if you're trying to play one of these like big tournaments, like again the million, which was $5 here, if you're more of like a beginner, you can only afford to play like a few lineups. I know people would say that you don't want to play it just because you have to be going up against sharks who will be max entering, so they're going to play 150 lineups compared to you, which maybe you only have one or two. Which, yeah, it's definitely going to be easier for them to win, but it doesn't mean that you can't win. And so I don't really agree with the fact that how people are saying that if you aren't able to multi or max out a tournament, that you just don't play it. If you want to, you understand the risk, you just want a thrill of it, try to win a million, yes, definitely play it because I've seen people hit all these big tournaments, doesn't matter what the sport is, that they play only one lineup and they take it down. Like there's been a lot of these million makers that people only play one lineup and then win. So don't let that discourage you from playing them. And then now onto the research part. So for research, I use a lot of different websites for basically like the stats, but also I factor in like the weather, just looking at like mismatches, O line versus D line, wide receiver versus quarterback, all of that. And some of the sites that I use, one of them is Osmo. So this is Osmo. They do offer some free content, like this depth chart, starting lineups thing. They show you all the players that are the receivers. It doesn't say which is in the slot. So for that, if you're trying to get into, you want to see those type of lineups, then yeah, there are other websites you can look to. But this one's just kind of like an easy one because it just has all the games, all the lineups on one page for you. Now, Osmo, they do require you to pay for some of the things, but every week they'll have something that's free. So they have like projections, point projections, or it could be ownership, top stacks. So this is a very good website, even if you're not trying to pay for anything, because they always have something free. And then another website, Fantasy Labs. So they give out well the lineups, but also the Vegas totals. So Vegas totals right now they don't have them up, but just to give you an idea of what it would look like. So if we look at MLB right now, this would be pretty much what the NFL screen would have, except obviously numbers and teams would be different. So they'll show you what the implied total for them is, also what the spread, and how people are betting on the game. So that just gives you an idea of what games you want to stack, because the higher the game total is, the better it is to shoot out, which is just means that it's going to be a better fantasy game to play. And then some other websites that I will mention is PFF, Rotoballers. They also do offer free content. So again, if you don't want to pay for anything, you can check those out, and they give you like snap counts, routes run, all of that. And then another one will be DFS forecast. So this one I'm going to talk about more into the lineup building part. Um, so I'll get into that soon. But one more thing about the research is the weather, because for game totals, Vegas does factor in weather. So whether it's snowing, raining, or windy, and the effect of weather on these games is that if it's really windy, there's going to be more run plays just because it's going to be harder to throw. The ball's going to wobble a lot. It's going to be harder to throw deep, and also it's going to lead to more short passes. So you're looking at benefits for receiving running backs and tight ends, and also the slot receiver. Now, rain and snow, they have less of an effect compared to wind. There's a lot of data done on this. It's pretty much, it's close to the same as if it's just a normal weather game. There's been a lot of studies done on this, so that's something that you guys can look into for Google. And then also Twitter, that's going to be a big part of your research, just knowing whether a player is going to be playing or not, because we get injury or practice reports throughout the week until Friday. But if someone's questionable or limited, we don't know if he's going to play or not. You're going to be looking at Twitter, so it's going to be Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport. These guys tweet out whether a player will be playing or not. Schefter usually is like between 8 to 9 p.m. Pacific time, and then Rappaport's going to be 1 a.m., which if you're on the West Coast, that's definitely pretty easy if you can stay up. But if you're on the East Coast and you can wake up earlier, the slate's going to be later for you anyway on Sundays. So those are the two guys that you want to monitor for any injury news. And then now lineup building. So first we're going to talk cash games, and then I'll get to this bracket ownership part. So for cash games, you're pretty much looking at a mid-range quarterback because you want more floor compared to ceiling, and you want more of a balanced build. So you don't really need to pay up for all of these guys. Yes, they're going to be the best plays, but if you're paying up, then you're not going to be able to pay for these other positions. So I would say like a mid-range QB, like first week, maybe Jalen Hurts, just because he has rushing upside too, he could be good. And then for running backs, I would say you try to get 3 workhorse backs, um, just because they're able to also catch passes. So CMC, Cook, Kamara, all of them are excellent. Derrick Henry, not so much because he doesn't catch a lot, um, but you can also look to a running back, someone in the mid-range as your flex, or if there's a value guy, because there's always going to be value usually for football. Just a lot of injuries, also pandemic and all these protocols and whatever. There's going to be value pretty much for every single slate. So if you're looking early, week 1, maybe there isn't, but I would say there's a lot of value already because there's a lot of these rookie players that are already really cheap. And then a big thing about cash is that you don't need to stack. Stacking is important, but that's for tournaments, which I'll get to, because you're just looking for high floor. So maybe running backs you want the touches. For receivers, you want guys that have a lot of targets. So in this PPR scoring, remember that for DK, full PPR. So you get a catch, that's a point. So if it's a slot receiver, they're getting all the catches on a deep threat, but all those catches add up. So you can definitely look to some of these guys are in the 3Ks. Like I know Callaway is just going to be very chalk, but I mean 3,400. He's probably going to be the best, highest on cash play of the slate for week 1. And then for tight ends, generally also just like QB, you're not really paying up just because you don't have the salary. You're more so spending it on running back, but that's just my kind of best build I would say for cash. So tight ends, maybe you're looking at like a guy like Kyle Pitts. Yeah, and then for defense, I like home favorite defenses that do have some sack potential because usually home defenses do play better, and if they have an advantage in the trenches, that's a team that I target. And I generally usually pay for a defense that's under 3K. And then for tournaments, this is just going to be completely different. So if you're only playing tournaments, don't listen to what I just said about cash games. Tournaments are completely different. So I'm going to start off by saying the most important thing is that you must stack. There's a lot of research done. One of them, DFS Forecast, this is an article written up. So these guys that created this site, the Optimizer, he won the Millie Maker a few years back, and he's been looking into just how ownership is important. Also stacking, obviously, but so how you are able to gain an edge in these big tournaments, so like the Millie Maker. This is more so about the ownership, but for stacking, there's another article I know that they wrote up recently, and it's that you want to stack obviously your QB and your receiver from that same team, but also you can double stack. So you're taking another guy, maybe it's another receiver from the team or a tight end, because the field doesn't do that enough. They think that a QB and a receiver, that's enough for a stack. But for maximum, as I guess, leverage, you would want to double stack it with your QB. And then this is also a must. You have to run it back with the opponent receiver. You can run it back with a tight end or a running back, but it is best to run back with a receiver just because the data backs it up. I know other websites, they also have done the research, so you can look into that. But this article, it's free on here, so that's what I'm going to go off of right now. You want to stack with an opponent receiver just because that just means that this is going to pretty much blow up in a good way. So if a QB does good usually, or let me rephrase that, if a receiver does good, the QB is going to be doing good just because the touchdown has to come from the QB, unless it's a second string quarterback or something weird happens. But that's generally how it works. And then if a game shoots out, then there's it could, but a very low chance that it's the same guy catching all the touchdowns. So if you pick the other receiver or the tight end that's getting also the touchdowns, then you're basically you're covering all the points. You're getting all the points from this side of the offense on a given week. And then just because they're throwing a lot, they're getting all these receiving touchdowns, passing touchdowns for a QB, that means that the opponent is also keeping score. So they're keeping up. This is definitely going to be a high-scoring game. And someone on the other side is also doing very well. So that's why you're trying to capture all the upside. That's why if you try to target the right game, this is how you win the tournament. And then also, if you look at how you actually build it out. So let's just take, for example, maybe the Vikings and the Bengals. So maybe you're taking Burrow, and then you stack 2 receivers. So you take Boyd, Higgins, because Higgins is really cheap. Then you want a guy on the Vikings. So either you take Jefferson or Thielen, and that's how you double stack. And then you run it back. And then also you want to have a secondary stack, meaning that you can do like a tight end with a receiver. So like Kyle Pitts, and you take an Eagles receiver, maybe like Fulgham, and then that's your secondary stack. And I'm going to get into the playing the flex later. So then there's also a correlation of stacking for your running back and then your defense, just because usually teams will run the ball more just to eat up the clock, meaning that they're up in the game, probably their defense is doing well, holding the opponent to a low score. So looking at the slates, I mean, maybe you go with like Gibson and you play the football team. Their defense, just because they have one of the best defenses in the league, and then that's also your correlation. And then you got all the money, you can go for Derrick Henry, just because I don't want to play another Viking here. So that could be, that's just a quick, easy lineup that really makes sense. So this could be definitely an example for a tournament. Feel free to steal this. I don't know if you know play it, but that's how easy it is to build a very well correlated lineup for tournaments. And then back to just the ownership part. So bracket ownership, this just means for the optimizer that DFS forecast has, you can pick or you can limit how many players you want in a selected ownership range. And so if you set this to, he has it on, I think it's 2, so it would give you a max of 2 players that is under 2.5% owned. But again, it's important to look at cumulative ownership, because if you look at this is the percentage of losing lineups that play that type of stack, and then also the best lineups. So this right here, this is about how the winning lineups play 2 guys that are over 18%, 2 guys that are under 5%, 15% more of the time than the losing lineups. That just means that there's a huge edge to going with this route compared to the other ones. And then as far as cumulative ownership, it is the ownership that, or also they call it total ownership here, it is how much your entire lineup and the ownership adds up to. So I generally like to keep it between 80 and 130%, because it's projected ownership that you're going to go off of. And that means if you're just off a little bit from these projection sites about these ownership, then that's going to matter a lot in terms of how it all adds up. And so I don't want to be too restrictive. I've heard like maybe 80 to 120. But if you're just a little off, you're not going to be able to get some of the lineups that might be the best. So I want to kind of keep it a little bit broader. So that's why I do probably 130. And this is also another setting, the optimizer that is free right now for DFS forecast. You can set all of this, like cumulative ownership, total ownership right here. You can just drag it to anywhere, salary, all of this. There's just a lot of settings. And then now the next thing we're talking about is the flex position. So for that lineup that I just built flex, I had a receiver in. I would say for tournaments, you want to play a receiver more. You can play a tight end, running back, but for tournaments, you want to play a receiver, just because there's a higher upside for receivers, especially because this is full PPR. You have to remember that, and it allows you to stack easily, because if you have another receiver, that means you can play 4 of them. You can double stack, you can have a secondary stack, whatever it may be, and it's just so much easier to work in the lineup. But also, data backs this up. They just have a higher ceiling. You aren't able to find a cheap guy if that's what you need in the 4Ks at running back that has the same kind of ceiling that a receiver would have. So again, that's something that you can adjust to, like an optimizer like they have here. You can limit running backs to like 0 or times like 20 and just have everything else at receiver. That's something that I'm going to be doing a lot of this year. And then other things that I would mention is just, if you're playing tournaments, it is basically okay to play chalk. How I just talked about the ownership. So again, cumulative is actually more important now than just a singular play. If someone's really chalky, like I know Callaway's going to be, it's definitely possible to get away from it, but don't feel like you have to get away from it just because he's like 30-40% owned. If the rest of your lineup is lower owned, you're playing some single digit owned guys, then play Callaway. It's definitely fine. And then another thing is that if everyone's playing a cheap receiver, you can definitely go with a more pay up for receiver build, like you go up for all these studs, and you pay down on maybe like tight end, defense, you try to save salary elsewhere. So that's just another way they can be different in tournaments if you need to. But again, cumulative ownership, stacking, that's probably the 2 most important things. And then I think the last thing I'll leave you guys off with is, I know for NBA we like to wait, maybe late swap, but for football, especially for TK and FD, these games are all at 10, 125 p.m. Pacific time, so there's really no advantage to late swapping. There's hardly any slates, any games that are going to have a guy who's really, truly questionable, especially in the regular season. And so you really don't have that edge of like a late scratch, just because there's not 82 games in an NBA season that someone can be out for load management. So don't try to force games that are late just because you want to wait for the news, and also don't try to force games that are early. So both ways, there's really no benefit to that. So that's gonna be my tips on how to win for captains and tournaments. Um, I'm gonna definitely be posting some of the best plays, the stats that I would say for week one and all the weeks for this NFL season. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like before you go. You can find me on Twitter at Boffles. Link will be in the description below. You can ask me anything down below in the comments here as well. And hopefully you guys win a lot of money this NFL season. Very excited to kick it off. So good luck on the slate, and I'll be back in the next video.